Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Rifleman Podcast. For those who've seen my last episode, I finished up a great episode with a 103-year-old World War II veteran who jumped into Holland with the 82nd Airborne during the Second World War. You are not going to see many more podcasts with World War II veterans on anybody's platform. I don't care who you are or who you know. I've had some of the biggest podcast platforms reach out to me for World War II guests. Because at one time I had one of the biggest living Rolodexes of World War II veterans in this country. But that being said, not every podcast, influencer plays fair. They all want, and don't want to give, not do the homework to meet these World War II veterans or to even remotely promote me, my mission, my book, or anything like that. So, that being said, I'm going to continue to do my thing, continue to have World War II guests, and go on from there. But, one thing I want to talk about is with 500 World War II veterans that I met and interacted with is not everybody was telling the truth, okay? Stolen valor is not a new phenomenon with Iraq, Afghanistan, veterans and stuff like that. That's been around. Stolen valor has been around for ages, okay? Probably since man took down a woolly mammoth. They probably lied about the size of it. And in doing that, in meeting these World War II veterans, sometimes you could tell the difference between an innocent lie or fabrication, right? We all fabricated. I fabricated when I got back home from my deployments, trying to impress girls in bars and nightclubs and whatever. But I guess it's what you do with that fabrication, what you do with that lie, and to the extent of it that it reaches stolen valor. And I had everything from veterans lied to me about what they saw for combat, how they acted under fire, to medals they didn't earn, to battles they were never in, into even the most which they weren't even in World War II. That's what I've seen come across my path of meeting 500 World War II veterans. Now, one thing you have to understand is when you outlive everybody, right? Your thought process is, well, I could say whatever I want. Who's going to prove me wrong? Everyone else is dead. So there was a little bit of that. But there was also just that they were telling the same lies for 70 years, 60 years, okay, all the way up to 80 years that they started to believe their own lies. And I am not going to mention names. I'm not going to oust particular people because that's not fair to their family members, obviously. And it doesn't do anything to their legacy. And I don't talk ill about the dead, right? Some of these guys are dead. Some of these guys are alive. But when you cross over from an innocent lie into taking money, taking trips to Europe, destroying the credibility of an author, of a historian, then I have a serious problem with you. I don't care what your age is. And I seen that down the road. I want to say one of the first World War II veterans that ever lied to me was right here in Massachusetts. And somebody reached out to me and said, "Hey, I want you to meet my neighbor. Come bring the rifle to my neighbor. He was in the Battle of the Bulge. And you're going to love what he has to hear. You're going to love his story. And, oh, he was shot in the face. And of course, me, when I first started this project, I pack up the rifle. I shoot over to this particular city. I meet this guy, and I'm showing him the rifle. And I ask the simple question, which division were you in? And I'm telling you, which division you were in is like asking someone what their name was. It's something a World War II veteran never forgot. I met veterans with full-blown dementia who remembered what division they were in the Second World War. You wore the patch every day, you fought, you died, you lived in it. It controlled the rest of your life as far as benefits goes, which division you were in. And when I asked this veteran what division he was in, he was like, the 28th, question mark asking me. So I thought that was a little odd, but I still had him sign the rifle anyway, out of the awkwardness, of course, who knows, right? Gave him the benefit of the doubt. He starts showing me some scar on his face that he was shot, and something didn't add up with this gentleman because his birth date was off. He was born in 1928. So you couldn't have been born in 1928 and been in the Battle of the Bulge. Being born in 1928 would have put him at like, I don't even know, 14 during the Battle of the Bulge, maybe 15. And yes, were those examples of those freaks of nature guys who signed up and lied at 14 and 15 years old? Yes, those guys did exist. Yes, that did happen. They were few and far between. And those poor guys didn't even live 80 years after World War II. They ended up chain smoking and dying of cancer and in the 60s and the 70s kind of thing. So, I decided to look this guy up. I went to the town hall, asked if anyone in the town hall knew him, went to the Veteran Service Records, and the Veteran Service Records pulled his record, and sure enough, he served in 1947 in the Army Band. So he was never shot in the face. He was never in the Battle of the Bulge. The dude played the tuba, okay? And so, again, he was probably trying to impress me and the neighbors and didn't have the heart to admit that he wasn't in the war, per se. He was a veteran, okay? You got to give him respect for that, but he wasn't in the big war. And that, back then, you have to understand. Now, I'm talking about the innocent lie. This is what I consider the innocent lie. Who wanted to be the guy that didn't see combat in World War II? Being that age, being in that bracket, being in that war, nobody wanted to be the guy who didn't see combat. Nobody wanted to be the guy who didn't fight valiantly and earn medals and defeat the Japanese and defeat the Germans. So everyone had to say they played a part. If you look at newspapers from the Second World War, you will see these crazy articles. Johnson boy writes home to mom. He killed 100 Japanese on Guadalcanal. Ted Smith, who's also in Belgium, he, killed 10 SS officers. And it's these crazy letters these kids wrote home, sent home to their parents. Their parents go running home to the newspaper stand, and they published all these crazy stories. And you know what? Good for those kids, whatever. But the point of the matter is this was it. Everybody wanted to be someone. Hollywood back then, the media, the stars, the war bond drive, everyone wanted to be someone in this war. I have interviewed 500 World War II veterans and met more, okay? Yet I still have not met a guy who peeled potatoes in World War II. Somebody had to cook. Somebody had to feed somebody. And very rarely did I get a guy admit that they were a cook. Very rarely. And I have guys that did. And you know what? I love those guys. They're loud and proud, and their name's written on the rifle. And that's their legacy, and good on them. But things, like I said, go from innocent lie and they graduate. Okay? You then you have like frauds, right? Again, point being, man is a veteran. I think it was 5 hours to northern Vermont, the Vermont border, because people were saying, you got to meet my grandpa. He was a B-17 ball turret gunner. He shot down ME-109s and Messerschmitts and was in all these different raids and bombing missions, and he flew 50 missions and all that of this. Okay, no problem. Now, 50 missions sounds excessive, but maybe just this grandkid doesn't know what he's talking about, right? So, drive all the way to Vermont, get there, meet the guy, and he's a wise ass to me. Like, haha, kid, yeah, you were in Iraq, yeah, well, that was a joke or something like that, and, what's wrong with you guys having all this PTSD? And I'm like, okay, this guy's an asshole. But anyways, I record him, and he's telling all these stories, and there must have been like 5 or 6 grandkids in a circle in the living room of this house, okay? All gather around, listen to Grandpa's special stories. Again, something did not seem right. Why was this guy acting like this? I ain't never seen a true combat veteran discredit anyone else's war, anyone else's service, and this doesn't make sense. Well, I pull the records of the 91st Bomb Group, look for his name everywhere on every roster, every flight log, everything. Where is this guy? Couldn't find anything on him. Nothing. Never flew a mission. Turns out I did find him eventually. He was a mechanic in England who fixed the planes. Never flew, never was shooting down Messerschmitts and all this other. And I could have gone back and blew this guy's world up. But why? Why do that? What is the point? Their grandkids think he's a hero. Let it be. Now we have the top tier level of stolen valor. Okay. Top tier. You get to the point where you're taking money. You're taking tangible benefits. You're going on free trips under the impression you're someone you're not. And I had that happen to me. And it almost discredited me as an author, as a book writer, as a historian, as somebody who's wanted to be someone serious in the history world. This guy almost took me out. And, he said he was in the 101st Airborne. And he said he was in a particular company in the 101st Airborne, a company that nobody, would lie about. Most guys say I was in the 101st Airborne, I jumped in, haha, this, that. This guy was saying he was in a medical company. He knew everything about this medical company. He knew dates, times, battles, towns, villages. I'm like, wow, there's no way this guy could be a liar. This guy knows this thing in and out. I pull up an unofficial 101st Airborne roster book that was created by someone in Holland. He's listed in it. This guy signed, prints for Valor Studios and Aces High, and I'm like, okay, these guys must have done their research. If he's signing prints and paintings of the 101st Airborne, if he's mentioned in reunions, if he's mentioned in books, this guy is legit. So I was pretty confident. Well, here we go. I include him and a dozen other veterans to go back to Europe. Okay, a $100,000 trip that I raised money for. And I'm promoting, hey, I'm coming back with a paratrooper. I'm coming back to Normandy. I'm coming back to this place with this guy. And it turns out when I get there, someone pulled me aside and said, hey, something doesn't add up about this guy. It was a friend of mine in France who did a lot of history. And I said, no, his records were burned in St. Louis because St. Louis had a big fire. A lot of records were burned. So there is a lot of family members that go through that. Can't find their grandparents' records and stuff. And so in Normandy, there's a chateau that was bombed out by a German aircraft. And it was where a medical company was set up, and it killed patients and killed medical staff. And the chateau is still there. It was partially destroyed, then rebuilt. But if you had served in this particular medical company in Normandy, you would never forget this building. It was literally in the same shape, in the same location, looked exactly the same from the photos, from the war, in person. I brought this veteran there, took him off the bus where he said he served as a medic, and was expecting him to, fall to his knees, cry, or remember, or say, oh my gosh. We get off the bus, he looks at it and goes, what's this place? I'm like, what's this place? This is the chateau. This is where you said you were helping guys when the place got bombed and caved in. And what do you mean, what is this place? Oh, okay, yeah. And I said, oh, wait a second, hello. How does this guy not know this place when this was like one of the pivotal parts of his story? So I'm already in Europe. I got 101st Airborne, stuff plastered all over the place. And how am I going to back out of this one? So I came back home. I ended up doing a FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, in the state he grew up in, got some more records, and it turns out, no, he was never in the 101st Airborne. He never jumped into D-Day. He never went to jump school in England. I mean, what? How could you do this to me? How could you take money? How could you bring your family over to Europe under the impression that, You were in one of the most famous units in World War II. You did one of the most famous acts of World War II, jumping into Normandy and jumping into Holland and fighting in the Battle of the Bulge. And this whole time it was stuff you read in a book. And it turns out he was a World War II veteran, and he was an aid man at a general hospital somewhere in Europe, but he was not in the 101st Airborne. He did not jump into Normandy, which is a huge, huge lie that could just bring down the house. Barack Obama was on, I think it was the 70th anniversary of D-Day, is up there on stage, shaking hands and hugging one vet that never was ever in D-Day. The guy never left Ireland or something during the whole process, and it ended up coming out later, and the guy ended up being a complete fraud, taking a free trip to Europe and hanging out with the president, and ended up being a liar. So these are just many examples of what happened to me over the course of the time, because I don't want people thinking I'm that guy out there promoting, look at this war hero, oh, he can do no wrong. No. As a matter of fact, a lot of the World War II veterans that saw combat, that saw bad things, sat me down and said, listen, we're not the greatest generation, okay? We made our mistakes. We did things in our war that you could never have done in your war. We got away with stuff that would put you guys in jail. For those who remember the Marines that urinated on the dead Taliban in Afghanistan, I had a Marine who served on Okinawa in World War II said they got in trouble for that. That's nothing compared to what we used to do. I mean, almost every Marine I interviewed who served in World War II had human remains, teeth, skulls, dog tags, stuff like that, war trophies. But I mean, a lot of these guys had teeth, had bone fragments, stuff they brought home from the islands. I think it was something like 60% of the Japanese corpses on Saipan were mutilated by Marines. And this is all factual stuff. This is real stuff. This is stuff I saw with my own two eyes. And what I'm getting at is those guys sat me down and made me feel like there was no difference between me and them, right? And that's not what I was looking for, because they're gods to me. The World War II veterans are gods to me. But the real combat guys, I feel, recognized veterans and what they went through in other wars. There was so many of these guys like, hey, at least our guys, at least our enemy wore uniforms. What you guys did, how do you even know who's your friend and who's not? How do you win a war like that? And they were totally right. And of course, let's not forget the bombing raids. Holy cannoli in Germany, frying whole villages and towns and thousands of children in a night and firebombing. But that's how you win a war, total war. Something Sherman did in Georgia back in the Civil War, and all those guys. They just went down there and did total warfare. But not getting into politics and not getting into how to win wars, but there was a vast difference between guys who I sat down with them who were BS and guys who were serious. And I wanted to touch up on that as we're getting ready to wrap up the rifle project, the World War II rifle project, that is who these men were, what they did, and in the lessons learned from it. So, and then of course there was, one thing I will touch up on is some of my acquaintances. I won't call them friends, but some of my acquaintances in the history world, okay, or in Europe. They sometimes some of them, not all of them, love to prove a veteran wrong. They love to prove a 100-year-old man or 90-year-old man wrong and think that they're so smart. Yeah, let's see what you remember 80 years later. Let's see what you remember when you're 100 years old. Because there's veterans out there that innocently, I won't say lie, but innocently misremember stuff from a war when they were 18 years old that they were only in for a few months or a year or two and never left home before. And some of my acquaintances over in Europe are so quick to jump down their throat and say, oh, no, that's not where you guys were on November 14th. You were here. And, oh, that's not how this guy died. He died this way. And it's almost like they get off on proving a veteran wrong. And that's something I can't stand. And if you've never served in the military, I'm sorry, if you've never served in the military, you don't realize what the squad sometimes doesn't report to the squad. Okay? What the squad doesn't report to the platoon. Excuse me, let me back up. What the fire team doesn't report to the squad. What the squad doesn't report to the platoon. What the platoon doesn't report to the company. What the company doesn't report to the battalion. What the battalion doesn't, to the regiment. So much stuff is not in after action reports, is not in morning reports. That I can tell you from my own experience. 2 tours, Iraq, Afghanistan, stuff that you will never see documented, stuff that you'll never see what happened, injuries, sicknesses, war crimes, in World War II, that is, in combat, action, stuff, bravery, okay? I can't even tell you how many guys deserve medals that never got them in OIF and OEF, and the same probably is tenfold for World War II. Nobody remembers a private or a PFC. Nobody. Us, we do, the average people out there putting up little monuments and memorials and stuff like that. We'll remember them, but those guys are almost brushed under the rug for 80 years. But that's what I'll close up with this chapter of the Rifleman podcast is Stolen Valor. And now that I'm wrapping up this World War II project, there's a lot of things I had to get off my chest on that. Thanks.